Welcome to Storytimer at Large. I'm going to try something different today. I'm going to try to tell this long, sort of convoluted story with a lot of people in it. It all starts with this car accident. October 7th, 1975. This young lady named Lela Hildebrandt was driving her Volkswagen Beetle down the road, going south from Culver Academy. It's near Winnemac, Indiana. She veered off the road, struck a tree, and was killed. But someone in the funeral home noticed that she didn't just have regular head injuries from a car accident. She had shotgun pellet injuries to the left side of her face. Someone had been sitting on the side of the road in the dark that night and had fired a shotgun at her head as she drove by, and that caused her to veer into the trees and perish from the shotgun blast and the accident. So that's October 7th, 1975. Her murder would not get solved until 2007. So let's look at another victim. 1974, the year before Lela Mikesells, in September of 1974, this is Nellie Mikesells. She is sitting in her home, and this, of course, is a picture of her when she was much, much younger. She was an older, retired lady, and she's sitting in her home in her rocking chair when someone walks closer to the home and shoots her through the window with a .22 caliber weapon. She perished the next day in the hospital from her injuries. She was a widow and lived alone, and someone happened to be delivering a package the next day and saw her. And these two murders, Lela and Nellie's, weren't solved until 2007. And the reason they were solved is, sadly, because this young lady, Stephanie Wagner, was murdered. On October 31st, 2006, she was murdered by her coworker. He was a new coworker. He was just moved back to Indiana from Kansas. His name was Rouse. And he stabbed and strangled Stephanie Wagner one evening on Halloween night. He was arrested, found pretty quickly and arrested for the murder. And he was going to potentially receive the death penalty. And his lawyers said, well, what could we do to get out of the death penalty, to get just life in prison? And it was decided that he would then confess to these two cold case murders that he had done in the 70s before he left Indiana and went to Kansas. And what was he doing in Kansas? Well, he was in jail. He had been in jail in Kansas since 1979. When he attacked Catherine Crowley here on the right. This is when she was a teenager, but she was a little bit older than that when he attacked her. And that's her son, Jason Learst. He was 5, or almost 5, when Rouse was a guest in Catherine Crowley's home one evening, watching TV, having a couple beers, and he began stabbing her in the kitchen. She managed to, she did not die of her injuries. He then went into her son's bedroom and cut the boy's throat while the boy was sleeping. Catherine Crowley managed to crawl to a neighbor's and call the police. And Rouse had tried to flee the state. He had tried to go to, back to Indiana, I think. He was on a bus trying to head back to Indiana, but he was caught, he was captured, and then he was in jail for the next 26 years in Kansas. But even though he had attempted to murder Catherine and had murdered Jason Learst and had been given a life sentence, Kansas decided in 2006 to parole him. And that's when he went back to Indiana and murdered Stephanie Wagner, and then confessed to those other two earlier murders of Lela Hildebrandt and Nellie Mae Mikesells. All right, let's move a little further on in this. That got me thinking, what else did he do? All right, let's take a look at a few pictures of him. This is him in high school, and this is him about the time of 2007. You know, if you were to look at him, if he was working at your restaurant, you might think he was just some harmless old man, and you wouldn't worry too much about it, probably. Let's adjust that a little bit. But I got to thinking, what else did he do? So I started looking around at the Winnemac area for other murders. Now this is Brenda Ginter. This is her in high school, but a few years after that, she lived in North Judson, Indiana, which is not too far away from Winnemac and the area where Danny Rouse lived. She worked at a factory called Arrowhead Engineering, and Danny Rouse had always done factory work, metalworking, that kind of thing. She was murdered in her home. She was strangled and stabbed, very much like Stephanie Wagner in 2006. This happened in 1975. Yeah, 1975, in the summer of 1975. She had a son, a little guy, not quite yet 2 years old, I don't think, and he was not harmed. But he did have to grow up without his mother, and her murder has never been solved. So she worked at Arrowhead Engineering. So this gal, this is Barbara Menzie. She lived in LaPorte, Indiana, and someone broke into her house or came into her house. Maybe they just knocked on the door and she didn't realize they were up to no good. Someone knocked on the door and they got in and they strangled and stabbed her in 1975 also. She had a young child as well. She had a young daughter, and that young daughter was not harmed, but also had to grow up without a mother. So here are these two almost identical killings of women in 1975. LaPorte and North Judson are not far from where Danny Rouse lived in the countryside close to Winnemac, Indiana. These two murders are both unsolved. But I have a feeling that Danny Rouse worked with Brenda Ginter at Arrowhead Engineering. And I have a feeling that Barbara Menzie's husband worked at Arrowhead Engineering. In those days, if you had a time card, a time clock, it literally was a card, and you walked up to a big rack of cards and you pulled your card out and then you put it in the time clock and it punched the card, and then you put it back in the rack. And those had your name, your address, your phone number, sometimes your social security number was also printed on there. All sorts of information was on there. So your coworker would know where you lived and would know, it'd be easy to write down your address and go find your home, go find your wife if they decided they didn't like you. And we know that Danny Rouse attacked coworkers, don't we? Because he attacked and killed Stephanie Wagner. And the thing about Stephanie Wagner's death is he killed her and then he went to work the next morning. I think he liked seeing the damage that he had done. I think he liked seeing people's reaction to what had happened. And so that's why I really think that Danny Rouse is responsible for those two murders of those two women. One that worked at Arrowhead Engineering and one that I think her husband may have worked at Arrowhead Engineering. I've been trying for about a year to find out exactly where Barbara Menzie's husband worked, and I've gotten close. I've gotten some family members who said they know he worked at a factory, but they didn't know which one. So, and then came across some other murders that were really odd, really strange, and let's take a look at those real quick. This young lady is Debbie D. She was not murdered, but she was shot. She lived in Hammond, Indiana, and in 1973, I think it was, she's standing on the sidewalk with some of her friends when a blue car rolls by and someone shot her. She survived. The bullet grazed her body but didn't kill her. She did survive, and she, thank goodness she did. But when I was looking into her shooting, the shooting there, I was like, Hammond, Indiana. Now, Danny Rouse grew up in Hammond, Indiana. What are the odds that they went to high school together? So I looked up Debbie's high school yearbook in Ancestry, and I flipped a few pages, and what do you know? She went to high school with Danny Rouse, who killed Lela Hildebrandt and Nellie Mikesells and Stephanie Wagner and Jason Learst. Some of those were sniper-style killings, remember? And the other killings were right up close, stabbing and strangling. Now these two ladies, this is Carolyn Vandermolen on the right and Deborah Kozlarek on the left. They lived in Chicago in 1972, and they were victims of a sniper-style killing in Washington Park in 1972. And Danny Rouse lived just a short train ride away. Then it could have been him, we don't know, but I've always kind of thought maybe that might be him because he has that habit of sniper-style killings. Now, one more murder that's unusual, at the very same spot where Lela Hildebrandt, the very first girl I talked about in this video, the very same spot where she was killed, a year before this young man was killed. He had traumatic head injuries, and they didn't say what kind, but I've always wondered if they were also a shotgun blast, but that somebody thought something else had happened. And because he was a working class guy, this is George Murphy Jr., he was a working class guy. Maybe they didn't really look too deeply into why he was killed or how he was killed. But I've always wondered how George Murphy Jr. died. Was he also a victim of Danny Rouse? Because it is strange that he died at that very same spot in the road that Lela Hildebrandt was killed at. And then I started looking at other strange shootings in Indiana in the 70s. And I came across a story about this businessman. He was driving in Walcott, Indiana in 1977. His name was Nagel. His last name was Nagel. His name was actually William H. Nagel, and he was 50. He was driving down the road when someone shot him for some reason, for no reason at all, really, with a shotgun. And he crashed his car as well and perished in that 1977 incident. Now remember, Danny Rouse wasn't caught for any murders until 1979 in Kansas. So potentially he's still in Indiana in 1977 when William H. Nagel was killed. This is a 1974 murder. This is Connie Fivecoate and her son Chad. They were killed, they were shot, but they were abducted from a park and taken to a spot in Indiana and separately shot and killed and buried in sort of partial graves. And that was in the summer of 1974. The spot where they were taken was so close to Danny Rouse's house as to be incredibly alarming. What are the odds that you're going to be abducted and taken to a place and shot and killed, and it's right next to a serial killer's house, but the serial killer didn't do it. A couple of other people, I think 3 other people, were convicted in this crime, but I'm still wondering if they maybe ought to look at Danny Rouse for this also. It's very strange. But again, it is the 70s and it is the Midwest, so anything can happen. There was a lot of murder in the 70s. And then there was one other murder, and I didn't get a chance to get the photograph. I've never been able to find a photograph of this woman, but let's go back to Nellie Mikesells. In 1976, another older woman named Stella Becker was, she was sitting in her house. She was actually sitting at the sewing machine, and she had it right against the front window so she could look out and see, you know, just the scenery and things while she was sewing. And someone walked up to her house in the nighttime, and they shot Stella Becker while she was sitting at her sewing machine, and she died. That was, oddly enough, a .22 caliber weapon that was used in that shooting. And as we know, in Nellie Mikesells' death was also a .22 caliber weapon. Stella Becker's murder, someone else was tried and convicted of her murder, a young man who happened to be a neighbor of hers before. But I'm wondering if they got the wrong guy, because I really think Stella Becker's murder was committed by Danny Rouse. All of these murders I've talked about, with the exception of the Wichita, Kansas murders of Jason Learst and the attempted murder of his mother, Catherine Crowley. All of those murders happened in a really small area around the place where Danny Rouse lived. You know, these aren't long drives. These aren't, and even when they are long, a little bit longer drive, you have to think about, serial killers never stop. It's all they think about. It's all they want to do. And driving around and thinking about it and building up your courage and building up your steam for that is part of what they do all the time. We know Ted Bundy racked up a lot of miles driving around. So we have a lot of crimes that look like the work of Danny Rouse, but are they? That remains to be seen. Take a look at this real quick here. The ones that we know he definitely did are Nellie Mikesells, Lela Hildebrandt, Jason Learst, and Stephanie Wagner. The ones that I think he did are Connie and Chad Fivecoate, Stella Becker, George Murphy Jr., William H. Nagel, Brenda Ginter, Barbara Menzies, Debbie was shot but not killed. Deborah Kozlarek and Carolyn Vandermolen were in Chicago, and they were killed. But yeah, that's something to think about. I don't know. This is kind of stuff I really hope gets tested and gets examined and gets solved. Yeah. Well, I hope that you have a good day. Thank you for watching the video. Let's keep our little community going. I think we're up to 199 subscribers now on YouTube. Thank you so much for subscribing. I appreciate that. Thank you for watching the videos. If you're sharing any of the videos, thank you for that, because they might get in front of the right person and we might just solve a murder here, folks. Thanks so much. Have a good day.